All right, folks. Woohoo. Hey, the microphone's actually working today. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Grit City Think and Drink, the last sweltering day before the summer starts. It got an early start for us, so if you get too warm, you're allowed to just come sit in front of the fan like this. So this, as I alluded to, so this is our last one before we take a summer break. As you can tell already, this place back here gets kind of hot in July, August, and September. And so we avoid that back here. Plus, everybody's off doing whatever in the summertime. So we take those 3 months off. We'll be back in October. Pam Craneball's going to be here talking about dance, which we haven't talked about. I don't know if it'll be audience participation, which will be, but come anyway, because I want to see you all try. So that'll be happening in October. We have talks already scheduled for November and December, but I haven't even started to ask for 2026. So if you have ideas, people that you think would be good, or if you're interested, just give me email at jimgal.uw, and I'm happy to hear ideas. So the more crazy, the better. For anybody new here to the Think and Drink tonight, it's a small crowd. Anybody new? Yeah, excellent. Well, welcome. He's like, what am I saying? Great. We loved it. So please, if you want to actually hear about what's going on with the Think and Drink, if you scan the barcode, you can actually join the listserv. I only send out announcements about the talks, nothing else. So that way you know what's coming up. You can also check out the website. Just Google Grit City Think and Drink UW Tacoma, and you'll find it. One, you can look at past talks, at least the past talks. I always have to give this disclaimer. The past talks where Jim actually successfully operated the AV equipment. Otherwise, it didn't happen. Occasionally, we have somebody who asks not to be recorded, so that's happened a little, but not much. So you can go check out some old talks that are up there. We have our YouTube channel, so you can actually go look through a bunch of these and learn some different things. So feel free, and also the upcoming talks will have information up there for those once we get them. So second Tuesday of every month, just plan on it. The next one is October 14th, but second Tuesday every time. Do pay attention. November is going to be different because the second Tuesday happens to be a holiday. It's Veterans Day that day. So we moved it to the day after. So that's the one in 7 years of doing this. That's the one time we've actually had to change the date, which is weird. But anyway, so that's going to be the one oddball that's going to come your way. So hopefully we'll see you at some future events. But again, we'll see you back in October. Without further ado, I do want to introduce our speaker for tonight. Sorry, I should, for those of you who are new, so I'm going to introduce our speaker. He's going to give you a talk to knock your socks off. We'll give him a short break. We will actually give away some swag. So if you haven't gotten a free raffle ticket, I will give you one. We'll give away a couple hats. We are down to only today and one more day of hats, and then we are going to go to some other apparel yet to be determined. So try to get your toque before they all go away. So make sure you're here. Either get it today or in October. That's your last chance. All right. And so then after we give away some prizes, we will have Q&A. So you can ask the speaker all about the future, because that's actually, he knows all of it. So you can ask him everything. All right. Without further ado, our speaker, Sean Schmidt, is currently the executive administrator for the Division of Student Affairs at UW Tacoma, but he has also led undergraduate seminars on future studies and sustainability at UW since 2014. He worked at Nordstrom for over 13 years, where he launched their Sustainable Business and Development Program, and then co-founded Sustainable Style Foundation that promoted sustainability across 15 design industries. Sean, you wrote Schmidt. Sean also helped launch sustainability initiatives in UW Medicine and worked in the UW Sustainability Office for 3 years prior to us drawing him down here. So without further ado, Sean Schmidt.
And that was actually awesome, because that was like 2 minutes of my talk right there. So we're already ahead of schedule. That's really good news. I do like to start with land acknowledgement. It's something I actually learned, oddly enough, when I was a kid in Nebraska. My grandmother would always, it was kind of a game we would play, like, whose land are we on? And that was usually a farmer's land, right? But then also, which tribe was here, she would ask. So actually, that goes way back for me. The other example of that was that when I worked at Nordstrom back in the 90s, actually 1988 was my first diversity affairs meeting at Nordstrom. we would start our meetings with a land acknowledgement. So it's kind of surprising to people that they think it's a very new thing, but it's been around for a long time, especially those that have been doing diversity affairs. So I was always taught that they should be kind of simple and from the heart. So mine always goes really quickly. How am I looking on screen there? Wow. That basically just want to acknowledge we're on the land of the traditional lands of the Puyallup people and want to thank them for the opportunity to work here, to live here, and to have this event here. So thanks for that. All right, is it coming up? Sweet. Okay, so one of the first things I want to do, this is how I start the seminar too. What did you guys think this talk was going to be about tonight? I want to see some hands. I see some smile. What did you think it was? AI, yep. And I'm repeating so that it'll be recorded too. So did you have any thoughts, Sam? I know some of you, so I can call you by name. And you can pass. Yeah, so how to navigate things with AI, especially. What did you guys have other? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll actually be doing some design thinking stuff too. So that's, yeah. For you? Cities, yep, that actually comes into play quite a lot. There's especially one of the design thinking tools I'll talk very briefly about as well. Any other kind of thoughts on that? Oh, universal basic income. Did I say that right? Universal basic, yeah, that's a big one. That kind of stuff has come up a lot around the world, especially when you talk about like scenarios and things like that. So that'll be part of the design thinking. I think that's going to be one of the challenges is that this is a big topic, and I have a half an hour to do it. Get in, an introduction to future studies, and hopefully get in a little conversation about some of these kind of items as well. So I'll go ahead and get started here. Let me get my notes. It's a little weird having to talk like to a microphone that you can't move around with too. So excuse me as I try to do that. Um, One of the things I'll be doing is sharing some items. I like kind of sharing objects, definitely sharing books. Um, One of the things you'll notice a lot is I talk about science, design, and culture together. Who here thinks it's a challenge to kind of put those three things together? Anyone? A few, yeah. Okay, so to prove you wrong, I have our first object, the Moscardino. Can you see that on film? I hope they can see it on film. Yeah. This was an object. Can you see what that is? Does anyone know what would we call this item? A spork, yes. But this is the Moscardino, right? So this has science when you look at the engineering that went into this, like literally how long these prongs are, how strong the cup is important. Lots of science. Design, it actually won a design award, and it's in the Metropolitan Museum of Art because of that design award. But it's from Italy, and one of the things that they wanted to make sure happened, the industrial designers that did this, is that it was something very important for Italian culture. Eating, obviously, wine. So even the ability to have pasta, to have soups, to have gelato with this object. So literally this one little thing has science, design, and culture built into it. So I'm going to pass this around so you can experience it's already called a spork. It's the Moscardino. So you have to remember that. The other thing I want to pass around is a book called Future Shock. Has anyone actually seen this or heard it? Have you read it or just know about it? Anyone read this? So this is from 1970. It's one of the books that there was always kind of things going on, both in the real world when it comes to design, but also science fiction, right? We had science fiction going back long before the 1970s, but this book, along with some of the science fiction that was coming out, was actually kind of real world versions of what can we expect. So this drove a little bit of some of the interest in future studies, which we'll be going into more detail. But it's a fun one for you to look at. Even if you just look at the chapter like headings, you can see some interesting stuff already start to happen. Sweet. We've already got past the first slide, so that's great. Okay, so I'm going to start really quick with why futurish. There is a book that kind of goes with this. The story kind of goes way back to, you did say I started at Nordstrom. After I had been in the sustainability position there for about a year, then 9/11 happened. The company went through 4 rounds of layoffs, and the fifth round came and they got rid of my position. So I had an opportunity to go back into corporate or into sales, and I was like, I have this degree in conservation biology. I'm going to do something with it. Started the Sustainable Style Foundation. was very successful, especially we had several chapters around the world working with those 15 design industries. But then I handed that over to the other co-founder, and then I was like, what am I going to do? And literally what happened was I was kind of hanging out at a cafe. I'd brought some books with me from home, and the three books that I had were a science book, a design book, and a book on culture. I'm going to pass those around. This first one is kind of fun. This is a magazine called Seed. Did anyone come across this when it came out? This is quite old. It says it's the premiere issue. They actually had a second premiere issue, and they don't even talk that this thing even existed. But this is a science magazine. And when you look through it, it does not look like a science magazine. It looks like a kind of fashion or some other magazine. But this was the one that I happened to be reading at the time. And I was like, how do they make science look so cool, right? So that was the first one. Next up, the other thing I had just gotten was this book of graphic designers talking about 100 ideas for peace. So this to me was really interesting because I'd seen other designers in the fashion world and architecture. You have Architecture for Humanity, wanting to kind of think about the future and inspire people to do good things. This is just graphic designs, but it's really interesting. So that's why I got to the design part. The last one was a book called Ancient Futures. Anyone heard of this one? We're actually going to be having a little exercise on ancient futures here in a moment. But this was a book by Helena Norberg Hodge, and I had just finished a research project in Ladakh, India, on snow leopards. And this researcher had come in to look at kind of how that culture had changed. Around the rest of the world, you'd had colonization happening over about 100 years, maybe longer. Here, it was happening within 10 years because there had really been no Western activity in Ladakh, India at that point. So she was able to see things happening rapidly. And she wrote a book about this. And to me, it was really interesting to see how the communities were starting to plan to not let the West come in and do too much too quickly. So that was the other thing that got us to the culture piece. Okay, so the rest of the agenda, we'll be getting to ancient futures. This is a group exercise. It'll be kind of fun. I'll do the introduction to future studies, especially the science of future studies, how design plays out. That's where we'll get to design thinking and how to bring culture into this, because that's one piece that's been kind of new as we started this. We'll talk about futurisms. Has anyone ever kind of seen or looked at futurism stuff? Great, perfect. And then the last one is kind of what do you do with all this? What role can you play in all of this? Okay, so this is just the Future-ish website. It talks a little bit of about how it started and what we're doing now. I mentioned the book. It's interesting how that came about. I was teaching this seminar on the Seattle campus, and a textbook publisher approached me to do a book because they wanted something in this category. This was not the first book I was expecting to do, which was interesting. It was a very challenging experience because I was told to use the Notre Dame case studies in this book, which were quite interesting. And I could do that around kind of how to think about the future and things like that. I got past the first round, passed it to the next group of editors, and they're like, case studies, what case studies? I said, the Notre Dame case studies that I was supposed to use. And I was like, you can't use those case studies. So here I'd written a book around all these case studies that they said I couldn't use. We worked it out. They did get published with those case studies, but I couldn't change anything in the case studies, not even the fonts. So all the fonts were different in my book. It killed me, right? This is the second edition. It is much better. I was very proud of the first one. This is much better. It has a chance for me to kind of talk more about how this all got started, how the class got started. And then also, I wrote all the case studies for it. We'll be talking about a couple of these towards the end, but that's why it was a really unique opportunity to do this for the class and then have that, have the ability to do it for the class. The class started in a very funny way too. I was doing sustainability classes on the Seattle campus, and the students found this blog and website called Future-ish, and they said they wanted a seminar on that. So we created this seminar. It's kind of evolved. Gosh, it ran for 2 years, and I stopped when I moved to Tacoma and started a backup in 2017. So we're about 8 years into this now, and it continues to evolve. So it's just been an interesting pathway of how we got to this point. What you'll see here, though, is this use of science, design, and culture, and especially the realization that, hey, everyone knows actors and athletes, but no one knows the actual scientists, designers, and cultural leaders that are shaping the future. How do you bring that attention? So even the magazine that I'm passing around, that got a lot of attention when it first came out. So how can we use that to our benefit? We did some other fun things. I don't know if you can read some of the things you can click on there, but there's a stylish scientist list. That seems very strange to a lot of people. We got a lot of heckled a lot for that when we first started it. But then when we made the point that scientists are as diverse as any other community. You could be a Harley Davidson bike rider or a fashionista and still be into science. And that all we were doing was identifying these people that had this sense of style. Bill Nye is one of them, right? He has that bow tie all the time. That is a kind of a brand thing for him. It actually became very popular. It was on news around the world. Some of the actual top scientists got interviewed because of this. So it actually started doing some of those things we wanted to do, which is really fun. There's some other fun things up there. We have Citizens of the Next Century. We have this Confab magazine. One of the things you'll notice that as we're going through here is it's very UW branded, which seems odd because this evening and weekend passion project has lived on its own for a while, but it's been part of UW for a long time. So even if you look at one of these past issues of that magazine, half of them are UW contributors, which is real interesting just because I've known them. And this has always been just a collaboration, a freelance collaboration. You'll see there's no advertising anywhere here. None of us are making any money off of this, but it's produced some really creative things. Okay, so before we get started into this introduction of future studies, we got to kind of take a step back and get people thinking about things a little bit differently. How many of you have heard this kind of idea that before you can talk about the future, you got to know where you came from? Has anyone kind of heard that? There's several different quotes around there. Yeah, lots. So this definitely happens in future studies. What I'm going to do is run you through an example, and we'll probably come up with a couple more before we're done. But this one is meant to be kind of fun, get you kind of thinking. I think Jim's seen some of these slides already, so he's like, what is this about? Oops, go back one. Okay, does anyone recognize this stadium? You do? Do you remember, do you know what it is? It's close, yeah. Yeah, it's one of the large stadiums in kind of ancient Greece, basically. Did anyone else kind of recognize this off the bat? So this idea of a stadium of sports competitions has been around for a long time, whether in ancient Greece, throughout Europe, throughout South America, there's stadiums. What's interesting as you kind of proceed through history, guess what you get? More stadiums. We're still doing stadiums, right? Does anyone recognize this one? No. Okay. This is El Gigante. It's in Mexico. It was built, I think 2013 is when it got finished. So it's one of the newest stadiums. But you keep moving through, and this is where it gets kind of fun. Does anyone recognize this one? Star Wars, yeah. Do you know the name of the stadium or anything like that? Sometimes we get people that know the name of the stadium. No one? Okay. There you go. Yes. I actually have the name because I always forget it too. This is the Mos Espa Stadium. Let's see. Oh, yeah, there we go. People know. Do you know what planet it's on? Tatooine. Yeah, it's an easy one. So, but this is a great example of how there's this continuum of things in the ancient past, in modern day, but also in science fiction looking forward, right? And yes, these are humans that are writing the science fiction, so it's no surprise. Do you guys know some other science fiction franchises that had stadiums? Hunger Games, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good one. Did you have one? Which one? Maze Runner? Blade Runner or Maze? Oh, yes, Maze Runner. Yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah, I've got multiple sounds going up here. So anyone else? Tron? Yes, absolutely. Tron was one. Star Trek actually had several things that have stadiums. So again, this concept of sports, of lots of people watching competitions, has been around for a while. So as you start to think of like future studies, even though you think you've got something really new and never been done before, thought about before, it's probably been there before. Can you think of some other examples of this kind of thing? What's that? Hanging gardens? Yep. Pyramids? Yeah. Throughout history, there's things like libraries. Got libraries in the past, libraries today, and then multiple sci-fi franchises have libraries, right? What were we gonna say? Ballrooms? Yeah. Dance places. You could go on and on these things that actually have this continuum of like this ancient future kind of thing. So that plays out a lot. This next one is super fun. Anyone recognize that? You got it? Fifth Element. Yeah. Do you know who the character is? Ah, gotcha. Do you know what the character was doing? Singing an opera. Yeah. So just another example of how it could be just opera. It can be just expression, art expression, music is part of all these things. So almost any part of the world you look back into, you'll find it. You'll find it today, and you'll find it in lots of science fiction. So that tells us something, especially as writers do start to imagine the future. Okay, so now we're going to go into a little bit of this introduction of future studies. I think the thing that surprises a lot of people is, again, I've explained why I got into science design and culture doing this, but how much of that kind of describes what's going on. And I think as we kind of move through this, we'll get some of that. We'll definitely be exploring some of that science design and culture, but also the tools that are part of future studies, the science of future studies, how design plays in, and then we'll go into the culture piece. Okay, this is when I asked, like, what did you guys think this was going to be? You usually get the robots and things like that. Yes, robots and all that. There's also some not so exciting parts of future studies. Economic forecasting would be one of those. So Gordon probably understands economic forecasting, right? When the accountants say no. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's actually a really good point. So this idea of forecasting, I'm sure most of us have on our apps right now something that's forecasting the weather, right? That's using data, a lot of data from the past, to forecast the weather today. So today's it's a good one. We knew it was going to be sunny, but there's days in the spring in Seattle where you're like, it says it's going to be sunny, but I'm still going to take an umbrella, right? That's kind of a different side of this that we call foresight. If we look at this graph, this is the classic economic forecasting. Without even knowing what's going on here, and you don't need to know what's going on, you can see these things that we're expecting. It's showing some data and it's projecting where it may go, right? What happens when you go beyond the data part of it, is you get into something called foresight. So this is a really great graphic of the difference of those. Has anyone ever heard of foresight before? Strategic foresight? You've heard of it? All right. What's foresight? I'm putting you on the spot. Yeah. 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 That's definitely a huge part of it. You can kind of see that here. What I like to say is the difference between forecasting and foresight is forecasting sticks with the data. Foresight is where you start to bring in human thoughts, intuition, creativity, saying, hey, yeah, it says it's going to be sunny all day, but it's spring in Seattle and it may be rainy, right? We may get hail and snow too, the way spring works here. So you can actually see that in the graphic here too. You know, the forecasting is doing that very kind of general prediction, and it can predict multiple things. That's still valuable. Foresight has this layer of whether it's uncertainty or sometimes I think it's certainty. You have things you're aiming for, and it starts to curve where those lines go. Some of that's intentional, some of it's unintentional, some of it's trying to figure out what could happen. The best example of this was back in the 1970s when IBM did their scenario planning, and one of their scenarios was that the Soviet Union would break up. At that time, everyone was like, ha, that would never happen. It happened. IBM was able, because they had a few kind of thoughts about what could happen at that point, of what to do when that actually happened. So that even though no data said that would happen, there were some people that said there's a small chance it could. So let's include it in our scenarios. Okay, another area of kind of the science, the data behind future studies is program evaluation. So I know we got some professors in the room. Does anyone do program evaluation or policy analysis, anything like that? This skipped ahead, sorry. There we go. Policy analysis should be first. Okay, they're actually very similar. So let's go back one step. Policy analysis. Anyone here done policy analysis? Yeah. How would you describe policy analysis? Yeah. 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 So what policy might lead to what, or how a policy you've done might impact, how the intervention might impact. So you can see that in the graphic here. So again, you don't really need to know what's going on with this. Of course, that would be interesting, but I always go with, like, what's your first impression? What do you see in this image? What stands out right off the bat? What's that? there's one well, I would probably start with there's two things happening. I'm trying to stay center on the mic here. Sorry, there's two things happening, right? One of them has a downturn, right? Can you see the data scattered, right? Um, you can't quite see this in the blue, but it looks like a little closer together. Um, but you can see there's something changed, right? So your intervention, we're assuming in this one that that was what you wanted to happen. But that's what policy analysis does. What's interesting is it can kind of look to the past and analyze policies. Policy analysis, you can also look to the future, right? You can use forecasting and foresight to have some predictions about how a policy might impact something in the future, right? So that's where we're getting back into future studies. The kind of sibling to that is program evaluation. A lot of times when you take the course, or there's actually books called Policy Analysis and Program Evaluation. They're very, very similar. Again, it's looking at the effectiveness of a policy. If you change that, what happens? And at some point, in the case of program evaluation, there was an intervention to create some new kind of situation. Here, again, what's your first impression of looking at this? What stands out? There's a difference. You can see without even knowing what's going on here, there's a difference. So really valuable tool to see if you've been effective. For the most part, program evaluation tends to look mostly in the past, right? You want the data that's already happened. You could probably try to do something with program evaluation in the future, like if we did this, what would happen? But that's the tiniest difference to me from policy analysis and program evaluation, is that program evaluation tends to look backwards most of the time, but it's definitely used a lot in future studies. Okay, who recognizes this? Oh, is that a question or a? Absolutely, yeah. So they were saying in program evaluation, the retrospective aspect of stuff. Yeah, that's definitely the ability to look back and see if it worked or if it didn't work. You can get much more complex than that. That's the amazing thing. It's not just as simple as one intervention. There's all kinds of covariables that can happen in really complex policy analysis and program evaluation, looking backwards. Okay, this one kind of, it's a, I call it what it is right on the top. GIS. Has anyone done GIS in the room? Lots of nods there. Yep, GIS. Okay. What's a quick way to describe what GIS is to the folks that aren't familiar with that? Spatial analysis, yeah? Everyone likes that? Yeah, yeah. What's interesting with GIS is that the same thing can happen. You can look at the past, what's happened when a policy changed, and see if this is looking at county data, for example. And again, this happens to talk about what's happening here, but you wouldn't need to see that to see how it's used in policy analysis, program evaluation, and future studies. But this is where you can also take this data that's a spatial analysis, geographically tied, and tweak some things and see what might happen, right? This is where you get into that scenario planning, future studies type thing. This is very common in future studies, which surprises a lot of people. A lot of people expect to be doing kind of hardcore science, this, that, or the other thing with GIS, but you end up doing like economic forecasting using GIS. That's a surprising thing. So it's a really valuable tool there. Okay, I said it was going to be fast and it was going to be very high level. We're done with the science part of future studies. There is a lot more. There are courses, there are degrees on this. On the Futurish website, there's over 100 degrees and programs in future studies. Some of them go deep into this, others go more into this area we're about to go into. So I apologize that we go fast and high level, but that's what we got for 30 minutes. Okay, now we're going to look at design and future studies. So this is where it gets fun. It gets funner at the very end. I think science is a blast, but economic forecasting doesn't tend to excite a lot of people. So, okay. So design thinking, who here knows what design thinking is? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So kind of using the design kind of tools that are out there, doing iterations of stuff to get to kind of solutions, right? I mean, that's a great idea. It's pretty old. It wasn't called design thinking back then. This is a quick history of that we'll go through. A lot of this started back in the 1950s when kind of there were some cool big projects going on around the world, right? And people outside of the design fields are like, how do you do this? Like, how do you get from what's possible, all these crazy things, to a final product, whether that's a building, a car, a fashion show, all these things. How do designers get to that point? Because that's the thing, you have to get to a product at the end, right? There's no kind of going back and, oh, I never finished the spring line, right? It's like, that's not going to work. So it started in 59 where people were able to identify what this process was. This first book was out of the engineering world. No surprise, that's where the big visible projects were. Pretty quickly, you had this kind of second, this article appear in the Journal of Industrial Design in England, where they were trying to, again, take this process that designers go through each and every time and share it with the world so that people doing policy analysis could actually use design thinking to do that. And that's where this started to happen. I actually have this book, How Designers Think. So you can actually look at the book. It's kind of cool. The other ones I couldn't find, but I found this one. So I think one of the things that you actually mentioned, Livia, was that you talked about users. So much of design thinking has gone the direction of human-centered design. And I have another book that I'll show you in a minute. I go back to, it's just thinking like a designer. It doesn't have to be human-centered necessarily. It happens to be for most companies because they want to make some money, so that it has to be human-centered. But when you take that back out, if I'm doing wildlife biology using design thinking, right? That's not human-centered design anymore. But like even on the UW Seattle campus, that's what the courses are. That's what the degree is, human-centered design. So I think that's kind of interesting. Whoops, this likes to jump ahead. One moment. Okay. So about the 1970s, you have faculty and students at Stanford starting to really like this stuff and starting to be able to share it. Livia's smiling again. Yay, good, good, good. So then that group created this company called IDEO or IDEO, depending on if you're Europe or in America. Has anyone heard of IDEO? IDEO? Yes, yes. Do you want to describe what they do? Yeah. Consulting firm, design engineering. Yeah. Using design thinking. So again, whether it's product design or service, or literally like policy studies, politicians started to kind of think about these things. City planners started to think about these things, which is easier because it's planning. So that was in the 90s. And what they finally were able to really crystallize was what this process was and what the steps were. So again, kind of first impressions, what do you see in this image? What stands out is pretty obvious. Lots of iteration stuff going on, yeah. Do you see the kind of the three main groups happening? So one of them is inspiration, kind of looking what's out there. Ideation, do you guys know what ideation is? Anyone not know what ideation is? It's kind of brainstorming. Yeah, it's brainstorming. It's the fancy way of saying brainstorming. That's a little more formalized than that, but that's really what it is. And then implementation. But yeah, if you look at kind of what's happening within here, it's going back and forth as it should, right? Okay. So here you have different versions of that. You have IDEO at the top and a bunch of other ones. Has anyone ever heard of Frog? I've actually seen Frog in Tacoma before. They were doing something with the city, I think. So it's another consulting design firm that works with a variety of customers, cities, product designers, things like that. What you see here is, so there's IDEO and there are three main sections, right? Each one of these other consulting companies has something very similar. One of them actually has 5 steps in their process, right? What this shows is there's no right or wrong way to do this. It's always kind of culturally dependent, whether it's the company or the consulting firm that's doing it. But you'll see they're very similar. So once again, here's these methods that designers use to get to that final product. And now everyone can start doing this. It was a very exciting time all the way through, but the 1990s when the more companies came out and people started using it, it was a pretty exciting time. So this is a little more detail of that. You can see in the first part of this, the inspiration stage, this is where you're kind of open to what the world has, what's going on. You have to do some research, all those sorts of things. At some point, you have to get to like where you're going with this, right? And then when you get to that point, you still have to figure out exactly what you're going to do with it. And then you get to your final product. A great example of this would be if you wanted to create a blog, right? Even with a dozen or so people in this room, there's probably about 30 blogs we could all create together, right? So there's your big opening up to what's possible. Let's say we decide to do a blog on food, right? So now we've narrowed that, right? But how many different blogs could we do on food? Probably about 30 different ones, like food on Pac Ave, food for students, international foods, right? So you still have to get the right idea for the food. So you'll kind of notice this shape of kind of starting big, coming together, opening it back up, and then kind of to the last thing. Has anyone ever seen or heard of the double diamond? Is he Jim? Okay, good. I thought you were like nodding like you knew where we were going. Okay. Anyone else double diamond? There's some design thinking. Do you know the double diamond? Yes. Yes. Here we go. Livy's going to love this. All right. We get to this thing called the double diamond. This is probably the thing that the students that have taken this seminar over the past 8 years say is the most valuable to them in their careers, because this design thinking tool is useful for everything. If you want to figure out where to go to grad school, right? You have the design problem or the design challenge. Just say problem, that seems negative. It's just how the design community refers to a design challenge, something you're aiming for. You have to do research, discover what's going on. At some point, you get to the kind of situation. Then you kind of have to, again, open it back up to what's possible, how to do that thing best. And then you finally get to the solution. Here they talk about design the right thing and then design things right. That's a great way of putting that. So this actually was in that when I had the 3 books and one was an article, this concept came out of that middle article from the Journal of Industrial Design from the British industrial designers. But it's a thing. So much a thing that there are hundreds, probably thousands of versions of double diamonds. There is no right or wrong way to do this. Each design firm does it differently. I know City of Tacoma does design thinking, and I've seen double diamonds as they go through it. This has been around a lot, so it's interesting that how many people do know it and how many people don't know it. But as people go through design thinking, this becomes very valuable. Have you used it much, Livia, in your stuff, or you just like it, or? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. Defining the problem is a core element, and especially in this area of sustainability. So that's why this is so useful. It helps you go through that process and get to a final point versus a lot of politics. You kind of talk about stuff, think you're getting somewhere, and then it goes back to the beginning, basically. But this is always fun in class to kind of do this as a live Google search, and students see there's tons of these. And their assignment is to choose one they like. It can be based on the color and run something through the double diamond. It's always fun to see what they do. Okay, this is probably hard to see in this room. We're going to talk a little bit about scenario planning, which is definitely part of design thinking. Has anyone ever done scenario planning stuff? Margaret has with the museum, or where'd you do it? Okay, gotcha. Anyone else? Yeah. What did you use it for? Yeah. Yeah, management investment type stuff. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. 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 This definitely is something, and I'm going to show a couple other examples of scenario planning. Can you kind of see the watermark here? I know it's probably hard to see. There's a very light watermark behind it. Can you tell what shape that is? It's a little bit of a diamond, basically. If you look closely, there's a diamond. That was when you can see the watermark, it works really well. But basically, even scenario planning goes through that diamond shape. Can you see it, Livia? She's trying to make it happen. Yes. Um, but it's that same idea. You have to start from something, expand out to what's possible, and come back to kind of where the solution you want to go. This is another version of scenario planning. There's no right or wrong way to do this. That one was somewhat linear. This one is not, right? This, you kind of have a starting point, and it can go either way sometimes, right? It can come back around. As we get into alternative futures, these images become important because when you choose who you choose to include in things like this, and when you choose to include them becomes very important. Oops, it likes to skip ahead. Okay, this is just another version of scenario planning. This is a quadrant version that I've used in the class a lot, where you kind of compare 2 things against each other. It's really valuable to be able to have a tool to take you through that exercise and get the brain thinking kind of out of the box. And then we get to charrettes. Has anyone ever done a charrette? Oh, we got one here. Any else for charrette? Oh, got 2 for charrettes. All right. I feel like an auctioneer. I know, yeah. So we got a few charrette folks. What is a charrette? How would you just describe that? I love it. Well, how would you describe it? Yeah, yeah. So working in the army, managing some of the field offices, so just so everyone can hear. Yeah. Yeah. Designing the right building. Yeah. So charrettes are part of design thinking, scenario planning. In this case, you were moving into a new building and they wanted to make sure that they were listening to some of the occupants on what was needed and how to do it, probably when to do it, all those sorts of things. New construction. Okay, gotcha. Oh, okay. The initial tenant's got to say that's how well, that's what we want to happen, right? Charrettes are definitely used a lot in urban planning situations, campus planning. They do them on the Seattle campus. I know when they do a new building, they have charrettes where they especially invite students in to be able to comment on that new building. So it's something you'll see especially a lot in city planning type things. But it's part of this design thinking world where you kind of see it goes through the same steps. This one doesn't show it coming back, but this is where you can have a situation where you may have gotten so far in a project and you thought you had all the constituents that had been part of charrettes, but then you realize you hadn't. An example of this would be a park that was going to happen in Ballard. They had lots of community discussions, but when they actually got to the final design and put it up for everyone to see, and there was a skate park in it, a lot of the community was like, skate park. No one said there's going to be a skate park. And actually everywhere it said there was going to be a skate park, they just hadn't engaged in the right way and pointed that aspect out. So were you going to say something, or I was like, were you part of the Ballard project? That would have been awesome, actually. So were you going to say something? 5 minutes? Yeah, we're almost done. Okay. So I bring up this book because this is an architect that was an ambassador to Denmark. And talks about how designers would be great politicians because they can get to a final product. So I have that book too. I'll pass that one around, but it's a great kind of example of going back to, instead of being human-centered design necessarily with products and services, just thinking like a designer can be used in all kinds of different fields. Okay, so now the last part is going into kind of how culture plays out in future studies. Definitely this idea of alternative futures, right? Of for a long time, cultural aspects weren't even included in imagining the future. So now we know we want to do that. That's been around for a while, but there's different versions of that. Alternative futures is definitely considering what's possible. Inclusive futures, pretty clear. You want to make sure you're having the right people at the right time. Preferred futures is where you know you want to go to a certain place. So like you want it to be a sustainable something, right? Designed futures are when you have a very specific thing in mind, and you still may have charrettes and have people involved, but that one specific thing is known from the start. The last one is design fiction. That is kind of what you'd think. It's science fiction, right? You put something in a science fiction, in a Star Trek, number one, to see how even the characters might interact with it, but see how the public reacts to it, right? The replicators, that was actually one of the things they planted in Star Trek to see what people thought about it. So it can be a very useful tool there. What's interesting with alternative futures, especially as you're trying to bring culture back into this, is you start with this idea of forecasting. That's the straight arrow, right? That's what the data says. Then you get to alternative futures. You have options there. Then you get to, well, we want to consider all those options, right? This range of futures. But when you really get into it, you're going back to chaos, right? You started kind of with chaos, all the possible ideas. So that can be very uncomfortable for people to come back out of that process and let yourself reopen it to what's possible. An example of alternative futures, this is an event that happened in Hawaii where they were considering the future of agriculture in Hawaii. Now, there's lots of ways to do that. What had not been done before is to specifically ask the Hawaiian agriculture community to be part of it, right? For a while, they tried to get GMO taro into Hawaii, and Hawaii was like, no. It's not that we're against GMO. That's one of our cultural fruits. That it won't work, especially the way you're trying to do this. So I think that was really important. So kind of another way to think about this in a fun way, coming back into science fiction. Did anyone watch the Mandalorian? Lots of Mandalorians. Okay, good. You guys know Baby Yoda? I think everyone knows Baby Yoda, right? Did any of you come across this situation where indigenous communities around the world were identifying with this Baby Yoda character? Anyone? It was a phenomenon. It was noticed. It was talked about in papers. I think the New York Times had an article about it. Any idea why that might have happened? Yeah, it's interesting. It's this idea of alternative futures of this one story has different perspectives, right? Especially on your background, your life experience. And that can be important, especially as you go into a design project of a new product, service, community, building, whatever it may be. Knowing that there's different life experiences and perspectives is important. So this is a fun way to look at that. So here, I'll read it so that it's on the video too. The Mandalorian is about an elite bounty hunter who must fight to survive after a job goes bad. Correct, right? That is correct. The other perspective is The Mandalorian is about a single father who must battle homelessness and a criminal past to provide the best life for his adoptive son. Also true, right? Now you can see the value of allowing alternative futures, especially culture, which is one of the biggest pieces of alternative futures, back into these discussions of imagining the future. There's only a few more slides here, but these are all futurisms, right? What's interesting is even though culture hasn't been all that invited into future studies and futurist kind of stuff, it's been out there for a long time. This is something they do down in Santa Fe, but we've had native futurisms in Seattle, several conferences already. This is one for Afrofuturism. That's been around since the 60s. Some amazing stuff has come out of some of the scenarios and charrettes they do in this community. Chicano futurism, every identifiable community actually has communities within that community that can have their own ideas of what the future may hold and what they want it to hold. This is K-pop futurism. And this is pretty much the last slide, but I love to end on this one because it's actually one of the case studies in the book that goes into this movie, Prey. Has anyone seen Prey? One of the Predator. We got one person. Anyone else? Do you want to kind of describe vaguely what it's about or briefly? Yeah, it's a prequel to Predator. So we're going back in history before any kind of modern civilization was around. And what's interesting is it is involved with Comanche, actually a couple other tribes as well. Community, do you know about this one? You just kind of nodded your head. No, okay. So what was different about this movie in Hollywood is that other movies have been dubbed into other languages. For example, Star Wars was dubbed into Navajo very quickly for a variety of reasons. We can talk about that too. In this movie, from the very start, they wanted to do things the correct way that paid respect to the native peoples that they were working with, not just with Comanche community leaders and elders and things like that. There were some other tribes involved. So the producers, the actors, all from the very start did all the kind of traditional protocols that would need to be done to shoot in a certain site, to wear certain clothes, to do certain things in the movie that may not have been shared publicly before. And the fact that the producers from the start wanted to do that and even intended for the whole movie to be shot first in Comanche and then dubbed into English was really interesting. So it's an example of how things can be done right. Another example that's in the book is the 30-meter telescope in Hawaii. They've been putting many observatories up on Mauna Kea. I think there's 21 buildings, only 13 were actually permitted. How did that happen? And it's not that Hawaiians are against observatories or against astronomy. They just wanted it to be done in the right way, to ask permission to put it there, to do the protocols to put it there. And the science community has not been willing to do that. We're seeing some change now. We'll see what happens, but that's just another example of what that is. So this just comes back to futurish, this idea of citizens of the next century, this, how do you inspire people to be interested in the future, to take action, to do things that benefit the future? That's kind of what the website did. That's what the class does. That's what the book does. And it's been kind of a fun way to do that. That's pretty much it. I have some things that we can do to fill some time if we need to, but we want to kind of let you guys break. I think I get a break. Then we'll come back for some discussion, not even questions, discussion. So thank you all. Yeah, so I have questions for you if you don't have questions for me. That's how that happens. So, okay, question. I happen to have some with me. Ta-da! So we can definitely talk. They are available at the UW Tacoma bookstore. They will be available at King's pretty soon. So I always say try to buy from the independent booksellers if you can. So if you're willing to be patient, that's your option. Otherwise, I have some here too. And I don't make any money off this. I do basket weaving. And one of the things I learned from doing work in Coast Salish territory is the first thing you do of something, you give away. So all of the proceeds from this that I get are going to the intellectual house on the Seattle campus. So that's the other good thing there. Even though I want to sell tons of books, it's not benefiting me other than it's getting the word out and it's helping them a lot. So that's been great. Okay, other questions? Yeah. 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 So the question is about like failure happens and why isn't that kind of discussed more and things like that. I think it is starting to be discussed more. I know from my sustainability work that that community was starting to share failures. I think of there's a fellow named Auden Schendler with Aspen Skiing Company that actually wrote a book about some of the failures they experienced. Because even though they thought they were doing something fantastic, like getting low flush toilets in these luxury resorts, and they were nice, low flush toilets, the customers thought they were being cheap, or that using at that point like compact fluorescent light bulbs was being cheap. They actually were brighter with good light. They weren't the scary cold ones. But that perception was what something he had to deal with. But what he started doing was sharing that when they tried this thing and it didn't work, he shared it with his colleagues in other resorts. That became super valuable to them. I think designers are okay with that, right? They fail all the time. The one thing you see at the very end of that process is probably out of 30 things they might have done prototypes for, right? So they're used to that. I think the public is the one that doesn't do well with that, right? They don't give things a chance at all to see how it goes. If it doesn't succeed right away, it's neglected after that, and that's a problem. So that's one of the things, especially in sustainability, that has to happen is, hey, let's try this, see if it works. Maybe we need to tweak it, do an iteration, and then it works very well. Especially the American consumers are not willing to do that. So that's been a problem for a while. Yeah. 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 So that's kind of definitely going into the full on like sustainability realm of things. I see it a lot. Oh, sorry. Yeah. The idea of obsolescence, is that starting to come up more? Kind of, it's related to this whole thing, something not working or becoming obsolete. Um, it's come up a lot more. I mean, this could be another kind of topic in itself, basically. I think just yesterday, Chanel announced they're starting a new company to start using all of their waste materials, right? There's been a ton of small companies doing things like that, which is fantastic. We need them, including a lot of local artists and folks from that industry. But for a major company like that to say, we're finally going to at least acknowledge this is a problem, they're doing something about it that they'll make money from. So there's that question. But um, you have to look at success in something like that as success and use all of those things. The idea of greenwashing comes up a lot, and a lot of people had a lot of issues with that, that I totally understand. At the same time, the more, even if it's greenwashing, the more discussion there is about that, it raises the bar for everyone else, right? So even if this company is saying they're doing it, but not really doing it, this other company still wants to be doing that thing to be more competitive. So for a while, you were seeing the industry changing a lot of stuff because of what this company did or that company did. So I think if you can look for those positive ways to drive that kind of thing forward, to drive that situation forward, um, it's you're going to get more out of it than just letting it go, which is what happens a lot. Companies, they have their R&D to develop amazing stuff. But then they try to sell it. There's no market, and they give up. They sell it to Europe or Asia, who in 10 years sells it back to us at a major profit, right? Why don't we spend money to create the market, right? Solar is a great example. For a long time, I was like, why has there not been a solar commercial during the Super Bowl? Finally, they did one. It happened. I was like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. So, yeah, that's a great question for sure. Other questions? Yeah. Like science doesn't like to report its mistakes. Yeah. So how does science deal with future studies? I think it does better. I mean, scientists don't like to publish their when something doesn't have the outcome they want. You can't. That's been part of the issue. Or they chose not to. I think that has changed a little bit. I've seen articles where, hey, we did this, it did not work, we wanted to publish it. The problem is that doesn't get you tenure, right? So the pressures on researchers to do their work and create, to show that their intervention is going to work, or that their idea does turn out the way they think it is, great. There are very few that come forward with it didn't work. But just like with Auden Schendler in that industry, when he did, everyone was like, oh my gosh, thank you for doing that because you just saved us tons of money. Imagine if scientists did more of that and said, hey, we tried, it didn't work. It's there. Usually they'll say we tried, it didn't work, so we tried this, right? In the articles that I've seen around this. But yeah, really great point. How do we get more of that? I don't know, because so much of it is tied to success stories in science versus just learning. So yeah, good question. Yeah, we're at 7:30. Yeah. Can I ask one question? It'll actually get you out of your chairs and ready to go. So we do this thing in the class called Continuum. It's a facilitation technique to get people up out of their seats and kind of talking about how they feel about something. So we'll just do one of these just for fun. Let's see. How about GMO? You guys know what GMO is? Genetically modified organisms food, genetically engineered food. Okay. How how are you feeling about that these days? Knowing that it's probably actually in most of our food, but there are some things that say no GMO, right? So if you're someone that like has no issue with GMO whatsoever, come to this end of the room. If you're someone that's like, I am not touching anything that has like genetically modified anything in it, no food, you're on that side of the room. So you have to get up out of your chairs and go to one side or the other or anywhere in between. Like if you're kind of in the middle, you can be in the middle. So this is the best part of future studies, if you ask me, getting people to talk about stuff. Careful. What's that? Yeah, so that just GMO. How do you feel about GMO right now? Are you super comfortable with it? Are you like, if you're down here, this was the comfortable with it, right? This is like, yeah, I'll eat some GMO corn right now if you put it on my plate. That's this side of the room. That side of the room is like, I don't want anything to do with anything GMO. And you can be anywhere in the middle. Okay, so you're kind of at the end here. What brought you to this part of the okay. Okay. Okay, good. Test the corn on me. I love that. I love that. Are you down here too? Yeah. Fully? Okay. What's your thought? Yeah. 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 So comfortable with it, but not sure, especially over time, what could be happening. Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so let's go to the other end of the spectrum. What took you to that end of the option? Yeah, environmental impacts. Yeah. 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 Absolutely, yeah, because so that was talking about the environmental impacts. It's one thing to put lettuce genes in other lettuce. It's one thing to put basil genes into lettuce. But when you put spider genes into lettuce as a pesticide, that's like, what is that going to do to the environment, right? Who knows? What is it going to do to us? Yeah. Spider-Man. That's how Spider-Man happens. Okay, there's a bunch of folks in the middle. Who wants to kind of share why you're in the middle? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, great. Okay. Yeah. 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 Exactly. Yeah. 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 So again, another comfortable, but we don't know the long-term kind of thing. Yeah. Other thoughts? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Accepting we live in a capitalist society.
Yeah.
Both, both with the goal, make the rule.
Yeah.
So, to a large extent, that choice of GMO, non-GMO, has already been made.
Made for us. Yeah. 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 So another one, kind of generally comfortable, but the decision's been made for us. So you kind of stuck with it. Yeah. 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 Unless you're in Europe, which doesn't allow GMO in. So that's what's interesting with Europe. Yeah. That could be a whole nother discussion. Other thoughts? Yeah. One more. Okay. Two more. You are the last two. Yeah. 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 We got the dire wolves back so far. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, very good point. Yeah. 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 So okay with the science, but the people behind it. In the case study for the 30-meter telescope, one of the Hawaiians that's part of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs testifies that the problem is commercial science. It's not science, it's commercial science. So what did you want to add, Jim? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Absolutely. Yep, 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 yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the question. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So starting with the testing, but also knowledge about what's happening. And then I think kind of that tier of what's happening. Again, just natural hybridization has been done forever, and you can do it quicker, right? Through GMO. But when you take exotic genes and put them in this thing, that becomes a very different question. So yeah. Cool. Well, thank you very much. Sorry I went a little bit over, but that's the fun part of these when we get to the discussion. So thank you all. Yeah, thanks for coming. Yeah. Take care. And I'll be hanging out. So
Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you, folks. We'll see you in October.